All right, here we go. We are live. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Joining me today to discuss some of the cool things happening in photography and other cool niches are my two friends, Mr. Lee Herbert and Mr. Martin Bailey. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, Frederick, Lee.
Hey, Martin, you can't just wave because we're doing audio here. So,
I
are you a
said,
podcaster? Come on, dude.
hey, I spoke. I must have disappeared into the ether or something.
You disappeared. You disappeared. Cool. All right. Well, let's do this. This is going to be an interesting show. We got a ton of stuff to dive into. I'm looking forward to getting both of your opinions on the topics that you both have seen, because I see you in the show notes right now lurking. But before we do that, I want to thank our first sponsor for this episode of This Week in Photo. That's our good friends over at freshbooks.com. All right, let's jump into story number one. This is going to be interesting. I really want to hear what both of you guys have to say about this. So let me read the little blurb we have in the show notes. It says, Nikon has just officially announced its new Nikon 1J5 mirrorless camera. It's a camera that offers 4K or video recording and some blazing fast continuous shooting in a single compact package. This is interesting. So on the video recording side, the camera does shoot 4K video, which is good, but the bad side of that coin is that 4K video can only be captured apparently at 15 frames per second. So I'm like, why? Anyway, so I mean, what Nikon says. Let me skip down in the notes because they said something about that. They said something about that. The reason that they're only letting it shoot 4K at 15 is because this is for people that want to experiment with 4K footage. So why would you experiment with 4K? Why not just shoot it? Anyway, so at lower resolutions, the camera can do 1080 at 60p as well as 120 frames per second slow motion at 720. If you want to shoot time lapses, it's got a time lapse movie mode that allows you to capture up to 300 photos, then play them back in 10 seconds, which is kind of cool. And there's also an intervalometer, which Nikon is famous for slapping on most of their cameras. And that's if you want to put together that time lapse video afterward, Lee Herbert. And finally, the camera has Wi-Fi and NFC for wireless connecting to other devices, like mini cameras that we see. It's kind of like a status quo thing with mirrorless cameras these days. So, Martin Bailey, I want to start with you on this. Nikon One. Every time we have a new camera and we talk about it and you're on the show, Martin, I ask you this. I'm like, Martin, is this something you'd get? And I know what you're going to say. You're like, no. No, I'm not going to get it because I'm sticking with my Canon for now until something really compelling pries me away from it. Same thing here?
Yeah. So at least I got to start my answer with a yes instead of a no.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's. I mean, the camera itself it looks great. I like the retro feel. I think that the 60 frames per second. You could almost. I don't know what the buffer is on it. I wouldn't imagine it's very long, but. There's uses for this camera. The reason that I'm not buying into any system other than what I've currently got at the moment is purely financial. I mean, because I'm a wildlife and nature photographer. It means I need long lenses with the best autofocus, and I've seen people come on my workshops with some of the best mirrorless cameras that are available at the moment, and they struggle. So right now, I think that there are parts of my shooting that I just can't do with mirrorless cameras, but that doesn't mean I don't like them. I would love to reduce my weight, not body weight, although that would be good as well. But just being able to carry around a whole kit in just a few pounds is very enticing. So there'll be a time when I'll do it, and I'll probably buy. I mean, I probably wouldn't buy a Nikon, but
no, you're not even allowed to say that word, are you?
I'm being silly, but no, I mean, I will buy into something for probably my landscape work. The problem with that at the moment, of course, is that Canon have just announced the 50 megapixel 5DS and SR. So, for me, even for landscape work, I think I'm going to be stuck with my heavy gear for a while longer. But I do think. I mean, this looks like a great camera. I think I agree that the 4K is a little bit. I mean, I have some of the I think the Hero 3 GoPro cameras that supposedly shot 4K, but that was at 15 frames per second as well on that version. And honestly, I never used it because you can't really use 15K video for very much. Sorry,
Like
15
frame
frames
grab.
per second. Right. I mean, it just doesn't look right. So put something in the camera to give people a chance to experiment with it. It sounds like well, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it sounds like, but it's a bit duff in my opinion.
I know.
I
No,
would
no,
rather do it.
Lee, I want to jump to you on this, but Martin, you mentioned something when you first started talking about mirrorless cameras not doing, or like in your experience and on your workshops, and that mirrorless cameras not being able to do the job. Where are they falling down at? I'm curious.
It's only for wildlife, very fast-paced shooting, birds in flight, stuff like that. On my landscape workshops, I mean, Doug Kay was there with his Sony in Iceland with me last year. Works fine, So it's really when you need very long glass and extremely fast autofocus. So that's the only place really. The weatherproofing, there are mirrorless systems that have pretty good weatherproofing as well. So that's no longer an issue. It's really just it's very long glass, or very long focal length lenses, and lightning fast autofocus that's still not quite there.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is good. And folks, if you're watching us live here and you're on the YouTube page, there's a little chat box off to the right there. So if you want to jump in on the conversation and ask us questions, please feel free to do that. If you are obviously watching this in the replay or listening to the audio after the fact, probably ain't going to work. So Lee Herbert, first off, welcome to the show. I want to dive right into this with you. So you recently did time-lapse webinar for This Week in Photo, so thank you for doing that. So you are our resident expert on time-lapse photography. When you saw this camera, did you rush in and place an order, or are you still on the fence? What's the Lee Herbert prognosis?
I did not rush in and get it. First of all, let's start off with the 4K, because video is my bag, and this does not shoot 4K. If you say it shoots at 15 frames per second, that's like saying, oh, we've developed this really cool feature with this camera. It shoots RG with no B. That's so you can experiment with color.
Yeah.
Because 15 frames per second is not video. Video needs to be at least 24 frames per second. It's like waking up on your 18th birthday and your parents have promised to buy you a car because you need something that can carry 4 people. You go outside and there's a motorbike. You're like, that's not going to carry 4 people. Like, sure it can. Put two people on the shoulders. You carry no, it can't. So yeah. I get it that the marketing department probably got on their high horse and they were like, no, we should say it shoots 4K at 15 frames per second. That's like Canon's marketing department coming out with this new 50 megapixel camera going, it shoots 57Ks at 1 frame per second.
Right. But why would they? I mean, I understand the marketing piece of this. Like, okay, we want to jump on that 4K bandwagon because Sony and Panasonic and Samsung, everybody's jumping, jumping on this bandwagon with 4K, if indeed it is a bandwagon. But why? I mean, I'm trying to understand what the thought process is and why they couldn't put true and proper 4K in there when smaller mirrorless cameras like the Lumix LX100 shoots 4K properly. Why can't this thing do it, or why did they hobble it like this, Lee?
Well, I'm guessing. I'm guessing it's just laws of physics, because in order to record 4K, I mean, if you think about what the camera is actually doing, is it's capturing, an 8 megapixel image, but it's capturing at least 24 of them every second, and it's got to do that for seconds, minutes, however long. That's a lot of work for the processor and the camera, because at the end of the day, digital cameras these days, they're computers, and there'd be issues with overheating and writing on the buffer to the card and through the BIOS of the thing, and so there's just I think it's probably just a technical thing that they just couldn't do 4K recording in a body that size where it was working. I mean, there's also
because they're able to do 60 frames per second though.
Thank you. That's like saying Nikon's engineers are not as smart as Panasonic's engineers somehow, or they're using a different kind of math. or something. I
Well,
don't know.
well, no, it's interesting, Martin, because I read that thing about the 60 frames per second as well. I wonder how long it could keep it up. You know, if you put your finger
Yeah,
down on the trigger and held it,
right.
that's probably going to keep it up for, you know, it's not going to keep it up for more than 10 seconds, if that much. So,
I would be impressed if it could do even 10 seconds. I mean, that's like I'm saying. I'm not sure what the buffer size is, so I'm sure that it's related to what you're saying, Lee. It's obviously got to be something like that, some sort of a technical limitation. But it just seems strange that they're boasting 60 frames per second bursts on one end and then crippling it on the other end with the video. It's like, surely, guys, you've got enough a fat enough bus in there to get 60 frames onto the card over the space of a second. I mean, it's obviously going to take longer than that to write to the card, but 60 frames in 1 second is a lot of data. So, it seems as though they're pushing the envelope on one side and then just letting it get all, I don't know, wet and soggy on the other.
Yeah.
well, you see, this camera looks like it almost looks like a beta test of some technologies, because it's interesting, Martin, that you said, the focus is a big problem for you with mirrorless cameras. And in the blurb, they talk down later on about how it's got this really cool focusing system where it will, they mention sport photography in particular, where I think, again, I'm completely guessing, I've got no idea, but I think maybe what happened is Nikon's engineers went to this and went, okay, what are people complaining about with mirrorless cameras? Let's try and fix those things and put them into one camera and see what happens.
And people were complaining about too many frames per second on 4K, so they fixed it by cutting it down to 15.
Yeah, we want our videos to look more like time lapse, so let's see how that works out.
Yeah. I don't know. So in the chat room, Arthur said heat and battery usage using that kind of power. So he's saying that it's a technical limitation there, kind of like what you said, Martin. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that, because other cameras do it. Like the LX100 that I have, my favorite camera currently, it's like a professional level point and shoot. I use that guy everywhere I go, and I've done full-length interviews with that, recording 4K video directly to the card. It's fine, and then I flip it off and go take pictures later, and it's great. It does it without breaking a sweat or crashing or anything. So why can't Nikon?
But you see, something else that they don't talk about that I couldn't find in the details on this camera is what codecs they're using. So particularly with video, what compression you're using to create those video files is going to make a difference in terms of how hard the camera's working. So the Panasonic codecs are really good from one point of view, because I know I've got the GH4 sitting here on my desk, and it does 4K, and the files are surprisingly not huge.
Right.
And that's because of the compression that they're using, but obviously that means that you're not getting as much data, so when you bring it into post, you've got less to work with. So maybe it's got something to do with the codec that they've decided to use for video. The camera wasn't going to be powerful enough to do that in 4K.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not a Nikon apologist. I want to look at it from both sides.
Yeah, I mean, we want to give them a fair shake, and we don't have any insight into the Nikon R&D development department or anything, but we're just speculating off of what we see. But still, with that speculation, I'm maintaining that if it was a technical barrier, that's Lee, to use an analogy. Lee Herbert is the analogy master. To use an analogy, it'd be like, the Russians send Sputnik into orbit, right? And then the United States says, we're not going to go into orbit. We're just going to go up and come down because we can't really figure out how to go into orbit yet. It's like it's been done, dude. Just copy what they did and either make it better or do something different. Why can't Nikon copy what the other guys, the Samsungs, the Sonys, the Panasonics are doing with 4K? Go do some corporate espionage, steal that code, and put it in your camera.
I think it almost certainly is coming down to something that they chose to put in the camera that is not. It's like, we know that there's Ferraris out there and there's Mini Coopers, both great cars for what they do, but just because you can go 300 miles an hour in a Ferrari, it doesn't mean that you have to put that functionality in the Mini.
Yeah, that's true. So
it's available. It's available, but it's the engine that you decide to put in. It's probably because they've chosen to put some part that they've used is not capable of doing the moving that much data at that speed,
Right.
like
Yeah.
Lee's saying. But I think it's, in general, to be fair, I mean, the camera itself, it looks as though there's some fun stuff on there. If the autofocus is as snappy as they're saying it is, I'm not sure. I mean, they're talking about, for the 60 frames per second, for example, you've got to lock the focus down. It won't focus at 60 frames per second. But they are saying it will at 20 frames per second, and that's still pretty impressive. So depending on what you want to do with the camera, I doubt, looking at the information we've got at the moment, I doubt you're going to be able to put this on a really long lens. Maybe you can. Maybe there'll be some adapters. There are probably some areas where this camera is going to be a lot of fun to shoot with. I think, concentrating too much on the fact that it's crippled the 4K is perhaps is going to, I think it's a bit of a mistake, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are going to agree that if you're going to put 4K in there, it should be at least 24 frames per second. But I'm sure they've got their reasons.
Marketing-wise, maybe stand on some of the other tentpole features of the product and not put 4K in the forefront, and instead make it a discoverable thing, right? So, in other words, bury it and talk about all this other cool stuff that it can do, so folks like us don't get fixated on the 4K and why they hobbled it, and instead put it in there, and then when people find it, you can say, oh yeah, we're experimenting and we wanted to give it to you, so we put it in there. It only does 15 right now, but we're looking at increasing that later. That would have been an easier pill to swallow than leading with it. Hey, it shoots 4K, and then with an asterisk at 15 frames a second.
Do we know? I mean, we're looking at the Petapixel blog post here. Do we know that it's been announced with 4K in the front? Or are Nikon talking about this?
No, we don't know that. Yeah.
So I mean, that we don't really know how they're going to market it. So maybe they will.
Maybe they will. Maybe they'll watch this and their marketing department will scramble and change their messaging.
Quick, get the white out! Get the white out!
Exactly. Pull those PDFs back from the press. Send them to the revised one with the TWiP editions too. Yeah, it's crazy. The other thing of this is so this is the Nikon 1J5 mirrorless camera. Maybe they're saving, and this is classic for marketers, right? The Nikon 1J6 maybe will have, full on 4K frame rate and all this other cool stuff. So
yeah.
I don't know. We'll dive into it. I mean, Doug will review this on All About the Gear, I'm sure, at some point, and dive into the details on it, and we'll figure out what all that means. So crazy stuff.
I think until it actually released and we actually get to see some photos and footage off of it, it's going to be difficult to judge. But even looking at all the other features, I looked at it and said, you know what? I was trying to work out who this camera was for. Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, maybe if you're a Nikon DSL shooter and you've been thinking of jumping into the mirrorless world, this is a nice kind of safety blanket. It's a safe step to take. But a little bit of background. I mean, I jumped into the mirrorless world and got rid of my Canon DSLRs about a year ago. My last one, actually, I sold just a few months ago. And I look at that and go, but the thing is, when you compare it to the other stuff that's in the mirrorless world at the moment, for the price range that it is, for another $100, another $150, you could get something so much better with a wider selection of lenses and things like that. And I think maybe, particularly with, maybe I find Canon and Nikon in particular, they're so fixated in their little worlds, almost like, how Bill Gates wouldn't let his kids have iPods, so you don't know what the other people are doing. And, in their world, they're like, well, this is sort of like the next step because people don't want to change. People have Nikon, so they've got all of our lenses, so we'll give them something to stay within our ecosystem. Whereas, at least with my example, I don't care. Like, I've got an A7S, I've got a GH4, I've got a Blackmagic, and I've got Canon lenses, I've got Panasonic lenses. Have adaptable travel. So yeah, it's an interesting step, but I wonder who their demographic is that they're targeting this camera at.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I wonder. I mean, we'll find out, but I'm just happy that they're doing something. There's movement there. So that's exciting. I'm happy that they're not just it won't be another. Hopefully, it won't be another full year of WTF Nikon. I want to see some products out of these guys. All right, guys. So let's move on to this next story. This is kind of an interesting story. It's not too deep, but this company called Novo is getting ready to launch a new line of camera lens filters for photographers, and this lineup will include the world's first filter to use sapphire crystal glass, and other filters will feature Gorilla Glass. So this is really interesting because from the standpoint of folks like both of you guys, you're out and about all the time shooting in sometimes less than hospitable environments. My traditionally my thought on filters were unless you're doing something like reducing the light with a neutral density filter or polarizing or something like that, introducing more glass in front of this expensive lens that you saved up for to put on your camera before its sharpness, and then you go put this either inexpensive or expensive piece of glass in front of it, kind of seemed like a non-starter for me. Some people say that's backwards thinking because you spend all this money on this lens and then you drop it. If you don't have a filter on it, the lens is now garbage. But on the other hand, your photos are a little bit softer. I don't know. Lee, what do you think? Gorilla Glass, is it, or filters in general, in this one that is made of this like bulletproof space age glass? Are these going to find their way onto your cameras?
I'm definitely, it's piqued my interest because I'm in the same camp as you, where with my time lapse stuff I use variable NDs and standard ND filters a lot because I do a lot of long exposures during the day. Yep. But I won't leave it on the camera all day long, and also with video you do need to use NDs more, but I won't leave the filter on my lens unless I need to leave it on my lens. Having said that, I have had some damage to a camera and a lens once, where you pick up your camera bag and you hear that unmistakable sound of glass moving around, like, oh, that's not good. And thankfully it was the filter. So I could definitely see both sides of it. It took me hours to get all the shards of glass out of it. Anyway, long story. And so definitely if they can develop, like, on the one hand, having bulletproof glass, that's great. But more interestingly, further down in the article, they talk about how sapphire glass apparently lets in 99.9% of light. So theoretically, it should not give you any sort of color casts or any sort of the kind of issues that you can get with filters. It's going to drop that. So look, the bulletproofness of it is nice, but for me, the selling point of these, and I'll definitely pick at least one up to have a play with it. It's more going to be, is it going to affect my image? And if it's going to affect my image less than other filters are, I'm all for it.
I want to see measurements of that 99.9% light transmission, because the only thing that I know that transmits 99.9% of light is air. So now, you're putting some physical object there. It seems like you can never be completely transparent. Martin, you're out in the middle of nowhere from time to time, and you put your cameras through heck, I'm sure. So, is this Gorilla Glass? Is it a necessity for your camera bag, or is it just more money to spend?
I think I'm in the opposite camp in that I have protector filters on all of my lenses. The only lenses I don't have protectors on are things like the super wide angle lenses where you've got if you've got a lens that has a protruding front element, then you can't put them on. But everything else, I've got a protector filter on.
And what's the reasoning for that? Just for protection, but not for UV reduction?
For UV reduction, I've not really. I actually don't even buy UV filters as much. I've got a few on some older lenses. Normally, I just buy a protector, but I buy good quality ones. Sometimes my protector filters can be $50-$60. So, even for the protectors, I always buy a good brand. I generally buy Kenko, and I think they're marketed as Hoya in the US. I buy the top of the range, so I make sure that I do get the best. I'm just looking at the Kenko Zeta filters that I use. They have 99.7%. Transparency. So you're pretty. Actually, I'm not sure if these all say 99.7. I'm not sure if that's the UV cut or the light. It's the same UV filters as the ones that we're looking at the moment. But I use them because I've seen people who have gouged, walking around somewhere, you slip, you hit the front of the lens on a rock, you catch it on something, there's all sorts of stuff that can happen, and it generally, these things happen. You're in the middle of nowhere, and you'd lose shots if you didn't get them. I think that if you actually did get some damage, the problem that I often hear about why put, as you just said yourself, Frederick, why put extra glass in front? I just haven't noticed any degradation in the image quality with them on, so I just leave them on unless I have to take them off to put another filter on, like an ND or something.
And that says a lot, because you make gigantic prints. So, and if you haven't seen any degradation, then I don't know that there is any.
I definitely wouldn't put a cheap filter on the front. I always buy the best. I buy ones that have got anti-glare coatings and things like that. If I get some sort of a ghosting or glare that I notice when I'm shooting into the sun, I'll sometimes remove the filter and see if it makes it any better. Quite often it doesn't. It's the lens that's doing that rather than the filter.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really not that big a thing. I get my lenses wet a lot. I'm often in around sea spray. And sea spray, I've actually ruined old protector filters. It's not such an issue now, but old protector filters, I've ruined them with sea spray. They just get so far in there that even wiping them with alcohol and lens cleaning tissues couldn't get it out. So at that time I was thinking, well, I'm happy that's the filter that I can replace for $50 rather than the front element of the lens.
Yeah.
So I'm for protector filters. I don't think I'm not the sort of person that's going to go around saying everybody should have these on, because I know some people don't like them, and that's fine. We all make our own decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if the argument is akin to, you remember the whole RAW versus JPEG debate. If it's or in other words, when I think about putting a filter on my lens, I think about that RAW versus JPEG, and the reason that I shoot RAW most of the time, even for happy snaps or whatever, is because, again, we purchased this really expensive camera body or camera, and for me, RAW and technically RAW represents the best that you can get in a given situation from the light rays that are captured on that sensor and written to the disc. So you get, it's like all the information that you could possibly get in that instance is written to the disc, or to the card. And when I think about putting a filter on that, especially in the Micro Four Thirds world, I'm like, okay, this little sensor is doing enough work as it is. Why am I going to put yet another hurdle in front of him to getting good resolution? So why am I going to block those light rays that are coming in, even if it's only 0.01%, and if I'm going to shoot JPEG, why am I going to limit the quality of the image on the back end when I can do it later? I don't know. Lee, what do you think about that? Is that argument ridiculous, or should I be shooting JPEG with a filter on my camera?
No, that argument is ridiculous, because
Thank you.
I think. Sorry. Wait. Should I be holding you back and not telling you what I really think?
No, I want to hear it all. That might be the title of this episode. Frederick, that argument is ridiculous.
I think using the JPEG and the RAW comparison isn't exactly fair, because the amount of difference that a filter could potentially make to your image is negligible, whereas if you shot something in JPEG and if you shot something in RAW, you have captured a lot more information in that RAW image. So when you want to manipulate it later on, you do have a lot more to work with. So I'm not sure if that comparison really works so well. I don't know. Martin's almost convinced me, because I used to shoot with the filters, and I took them off actually probably about a year ago, and I pretty much only use the ND filters now. But I really haven't noticed that much difference. So, I mean, to be honest, the reason why I haven't put the filters back on is just because I've been lazy, and no, damn it, I've been busy. Yeah, I've been too busy to put them back on. That's why.
Weren't you in marketing? You're not replace all the lazies with busy. That's all you gotta say, and you're good.
I'm not lazy. I'm efficient.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just occupied. I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. This is a really good conversation, because this is, if I was gonna put filters on my lenses, they would be sapphire crystal or Gorilla Glass. So Novo.
So that's the thing. I'd love to try these. I think it's interesting that there are some tests that they show how sapphire is actually more brittle than glass. So for a quick impact, I'm not sure that it's the best thing to use. For the light transmission, for sure, it's got to be better. But when you're talking less than a percentage of light, I'm not sure it's going to. For me, it'll depend on how much these are. I think if they're, I don't know, if they're $200, I might not buy one. If they're 70 or 80, I might.
Yeah.
Well, they were saying they're going to be between they quoted pounds, but if you convert it to US dollars, I think it was between 80 and 170, 180 US.
Oh yeah, I see that at the bottom there. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably consider them. Knowing me, I mean, if I actually believe that these are better than what I'm currently using, I'll probably get it, because I hate the thought of using something when there's something better out there. I'm a bit of an idiot on that in that respect. So
yeah, I'm in the same club, Martin. Don't worry.
Yeah, me too.
So I mean, I'll probably give these a try. I think it's interesting. The other thing that I've been really looking at a lot is the hydrophilic coatings, where there's I think Tokina, I think it is releasing some filters that just hate water. So when you get water on them, it beads and drops off really quickly.
Nice. Cool.
That would be really nice in places like Iceland when you're shooting in waterfalls and things. It rains all the time and you're in spray constantly. I'm not sure how good they're going to be at getting rid of it, but I'm interested in that as well. And I did see something in this article about the water resistance or something like that as well. So hopefully there'll be some of that happening. But
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought of a potential problem there, because what if it's resistant to water but not to salt? So that means if it's seawater, all the water gets off, and now your lens is covered in salt. That's not a good
salt. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. I've seen videos with that, sort of scientific demonstration videos with that coating, where it actually physically repels water. It's not just resistant, it actually pushes it out of the way. And when I saw those videos, I was thinking, man, wouldn't that be cool if your camera was dipped in that stuff? So like the next generation of weather sealing, you're still weather sealed, but then you have this extra layer of protection where you could throw your camera in a bucket of water and all the water leaves the bucket or something.
It's like Mentos in a bottle of Coke.
Yeah, awesome. Like I'm out of here. So,
I want to shoot that in slow motion.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I mean, I love these kind of innovations because it's like they're polishing up the edges. Like, I mean, there was nothing wrong, I guess, with filter technology before they came out with this, but it just makes sense now, especially with all these smartphone manufacturers using Gorilla Glass on the devices, watches, and phones and tablets and all that. It only makes sense for that technology to make it down into places that actually needed a lot, on the front of lenses as well. So interesting. So kudos to the folks over at Novo and our friends at Petapixel for the article. All right, guys. So this next thing I wanted to chat with you about is and Lee, this is one of the main reasons why you're on the show, because it's about video. So the whole idea. Well, no, not really. Sorry. Yeah, your face is perfect for an audio podcast. So anyway, so
always had a face for radio, yeah.
For audio podcasting, you got to update it. So when we look at the tools that are out there for video, like we talked about these cameras. Like the first story we talked about was the Nikon with the 4K video, the quote 4K video on there. Photographers in increasing numbers are moving into video or finding it necessary to learn how to use video and all that entails. It's not just pushing the red button. It is also pushing the red button and having a fast enough card to read it or to write it, depending on the resolution of the video that you're capturing. It's storage considerations because you're creating a lot of data. Where does that data go? It's editing it in software, which is the crux of this conversation. So when you start focusing in on the tools, if you're a photographer and you're like, you know what, I finally figured out Photoshop. Finally, now I want to do video. Yeah, of course, Photoshop does video, but is that the right tool? Lee, I want to start with you on this. When photographers, say a photographer's watching this, and you're like, yeah, he's speaking to me. I need to learn how to do video, but I'm a Lightroom, Aperture, or Photoshop person. what's the best tool for me? Is it iMovie? Is it Sony Vegas? Is it Final Cut Pro, Premiere? What do you think? Like, that's the basis of this. What's the best tool or the current state of tool options for photographers today, Lee?
I think from a tool point of view, we're spoiled for choice. So the best tool is very much like the best camera. It's the one you have with you. So
Yeah.
I'd say don't go crazy and go out and buy something right away. If you're just starting off, because the very basics of editing is taking one video clip and another video clip and either cutting bits off or adding stuff on and then gluing them together, and that's the very basics, and that's all you need for the basics. So to get started, if you've got a Mac, you've got iMovie on there. If you've got a Windows PC, you've got Movie Maker. You see, I said that without even sniggering. If you've got
Some people still use that app. Don't get hate mail, man. I'm telling you.
It's just because a lot. Hey, look, it's like hairspray. Just because people use it doesn't make it right.
That's right. That's right.
So
I use it all the time. So yeah.
Me too.
on your face.
Martin's like, yeah, me too. Yeah.
So, but yeah, if you've got a smartphone, edit it on your smartphone. There's apps that you can do. So I'd say for just getting started, use whatever you've got. When you get more advanced, then it comes down to what you've got. So if you've got Premiere already, so if you subscribe to Adobe and you've got Premiere, and Premiere doesn't look too scary, because if you haven't got experience in editing, Premiere can be very scary and very intimidating. If you want something less scary and intimidating, I think Final Cut is fantastic for getting started, because the entry level in terms of the learning curve is a lot less steep in Final Cut, so it's a lot easier to get in and get started. In terms of further down, you don't have to worry that, I'm using Final Cut, but then when I want to do real editing, I'll need to get something else. Final Cut is a real video editor. You can do everything that you'll ever need to do. In fact, there was just a whole big thing on Apple's website that the latest Will Smith movie, Focus, was all done in Final Cut Pro 10.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder, because that is the big question. There's a couple of questions that pop up when you start asking these kinds of questions, and I think it come in. I actually did an episode with I can't remember with Chris Fenwick on his Final Cut Pro show, and or Final Cut 10. We were talking about the title of the show was Final Cut for Photographers or something like that, and the path of least resistance for us photographers moving into it. And the questions that I posed were, which is better? I'm a member of the Creative Cloud. I subscribe to the Creative Cloud, so I already have the bits for Premiere on my hard drive, and if I don't, I can get them. So why should I go into Final Cut if I already have the bits for a perfectly good video editor available to me now? And it doesn't seem like Adobe's going away anytime soon. On the other hand, Apple just put Aperture on the firing line, right? And now there's Final Cut. So when I was talking to him, I was like, that makes me a little timid of investing. Yeah, they could be very capable apps right now, but which one will be around in 2015 or 2020 or whatever when I'm really into this stuff? Is Apple going to pull the rug out from underneath me again and say, you know what? All that marketing we put into Final Cut, we didn't mean it. We're moving in this other direction. I don't know. I know you have an answer to that.
I've got two things for you. Number one, are you driving a car at the moment that uses gasoline?
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, why? Everything's going electric. So you use what's right for you at the moment. So let's use that analogy at first.
Okay.
But secondly,
Lee, I got to tell you, that is a flawed analogy. But I had to get that in there. But continue.
Okay, back it up.
No, go ahead, continue.
Okay, but the other thing is, and again, so full disclosure, I'm an ex-Apple employee. I'm a certified Final Cut Pro master trainer. You're asking me. I'm biased. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, I'm an ex-Apple employee as well. And I'm asking the hard questions. So it's all good.
But particularly in terms of, is Final Cut Pro still a pro application? It is absolutely still a pro application. But I actually think Apple made a very interesting move when they went. The reason why there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth in 2011 when Apple moved from Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10 is that they changed the workflow. That was the biggest thing, that professional video editors were looking at it going, it doesn't work the way that I'm used to working. Now, they did leave a lot of functions out that they've now brought back. So there was very justifiable complaints back then. But I think what Apple did, and I don't know, but I'm guessing, and I've spoken to some people inside of Apple, and they've kind of confirmed this, but they don't confirm anything, is that they could continue to make Final Cut Pro for the 50,000 professional editors in the world that were using it, or they could change it. Some people would say dumb it down. I would say simplify it and make it more accessible.
Yeah.
And now, instead of the 50,000 pro editors around the world, there's over 1 million people using Final Cut Pro 10, and those people are photographers, doctors, lawyers. It's people who have got these cameras that shoot video, and they want to do more than iMovie does, but it's still got all the functions that the pros do. So in terms of will it go away, hey, they could pull the plug tomorrow, but at the moment, it's a fantastic product, and I think specifically for the audience of this podcast who are not professional video editors but want to do professional video editing, that's exactly who Final Cut Pro 10 was made for.
Yeah, it's the people without the legacy of experience behind them, right? Or the
baggage.
I don't know, the baggage. Thank you. The baggage of experience. You come in fresh, and you don't have those learning pathways already established using timelines and all that. No, I totally get it, and that's who I was. I mean, I understand the timeline. I was somewhere in the middle. So I mean, I don't have as much experience editing video as you do, Lee, but I know my way around a timeline, and I can cut simple things together. And when I saw, full disclosure, when I saw Final Cut when they first released it, I purchased it, and I looked at it, and just like everybody else, I don't think I opened it again. That day, I think that day or at least a couple days later, I went and started learning Premiere. I was on lynda.com learning Premiere and getting back and familiar with it and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't have time to learn something new. I'm going to use something that still has a timeline. And then I came back to Final Cut, and since then they'd made a ton of changes in there, and I continue to be blown away every time I launch it. So it works great now. So Martin, when you look at this, video from the standpoint of a still photographer or the still photographer that's slowly introducing video into his or her workflow, what do you, from your perspective, what are the tools that you consider, and what are the challenges with that kind of move?
Well, I basically, many years ago when I first started messing around with video, probably when the 5D Mark II came out, I did, one of the sponsors for today. I jumped onto lynda.com. I learned how to use Premiere because I was at that time, it wasn't Creative Cloud, it was the old Master Suite, but I was still buying the Master Suite. So I'd got the tools, I use them today. I've not bought Final Cut Pro. I think it looks great, and I think if I needed it, I wouldn't hesitate to go and buy it. But because I already have Premiere now as part of the Creative Cloud,
right,
that's what I always use. And I also, I use After Effects for time lapses. I'll go in and put time lapses together in After Effects. I've got it. It's already part of the $50 a month that I'm paying for the cloud anyway.
Yeah.
And I use other applications for still slideshows and things like that, and sometimes drop video into those. But yeah, I'm a Premiere and After Effects guy, and I right now I don't have a need to try to get anything else into my workflow.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, once I think that's part of the battle that Apple has to deal with, is that the built-in, like Martin, both of you guys, you're artists, right? So in the end, you just want to, you don't care about the pixels and the knobs and whizzes and all that stuff. It's just, okay, what lets me get from point A to point B the quickest? And Martin, you've already invested in A, paying for the Creative Cloud, and B, figuring out how to do time lapses with After Effects and edit in Premiere. So it's gonna, what's the dynamite that could knock you over into the Final Cut Pro world? Probably not much, right? They have to go nuclear at that point to do that. And then on the other side of it, we were talking. This whole conversation is centered around Macintosh, right? So Adobe is both, right? So they could concede the market to Apple and Final Cut if they wanted to, and still be in the game with all the Windows users, right?
Yeah, one of the other things that has almost made me go out and pull the trigger on Final Cut Pro is the availability of some pretty cool plugins, and there's a lot of good stuff out there that is only available for Final Cut Pro, and I mean that could be at some point something I say, okay, I've just got to use this particular effect, and it's only available for Final Cut Pro, so then I'd jump in.
Yeah.
Right now, that's not happened, but that's something to keep in mind as well. It's like your camera. Which camera system do you buy into? Do you want a mirrorless? Do you want a Nikon, a Canon, or whatever? And it generally doesn't come down to the body, which is the, in this case, it would be Final Cut Pro or Premiere. It's really about the lenses and whether they've got the lenses that that you'll be needing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And if that's why I'm not in mirrorless at this point, lenses and autofocus. But as soon as that's there, if there's something that I need, say I don't know, Sony come out with an f2.8 800mm lens for the Alpha system, and the autofocus is there and all of that, I'm thinking, oh, well, okay, maybe now it's time to jump into the Alpha system.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the other thing is the plugins and the ecosphere or whatever it is that surrounds the product as well as the product itself.
Yeah.
Martin,
See,
let's hook up some time offline.
Martin, that's your age talking because you're more experienced now. See, the younger Martin would have been like, you know what, I'm just going to go buy it and figure it out later. The more experienced, methodical, pragmatic Martin is, you know what, I can wait. I have a perfectly good camera system here right now. I'm going to wait until they figure it out, and then I'll jump in. Right? So.
Yeah. I've almost, literally, I mean, our current financial or fiscal year for my company ends at the end of the month. And I seriously considered going out and buying into a mirrorless system so that I don't have to pay as much corporate tax. But I really just can't. I can't decide on a system because if I'm going to do it, I want one that can get me close to my ultimate goal. And right now, it's not quite there. But that's because I'm trying to do everything with one system. If I just concentrated on landscape, I would have probably already had a system. I think there's a lot of great stuff happening in the mirrorless world.
So from your perspective, bringing it full circle here, video editing system wise, you're a Premiere user, you're happy with it, it does everything you need it to do, plus you're a subscriber to the Creative Cloud, so it's a no-brainer for you. On the Lee Herbert side, you understand and know Premiere, worked at Apple, but currently have no affiliation with Apple, but you still know and love and teach Final Cut Pro 10, correct?
Yes.
All right. So basically, this discussion leads nowhere because we don't know what to choose. Right?
I would love to spend Martin, let's organize some time offline. I will spend half an hour with you. You'll switch to Final Cut. We'll sort it out.
I'm sure you could get me there.
Yeah. Well, love it. See, these conversations.
If I got my wife to marry me, I can convince anyone of anything.
Well, Martin is in a different country, so the drugs won't work on him. So
my brother's in Tokyo right now. I will have him come to your house.
Lee says, take this pill. Cool. All right, guys. Before we dive into the Q&A, I want to thank our second sponsor for this episode of This Week in Photo, and that's our good friends over at lynda.com. All right, guys, let's jump into the listener Q&A. This week's question is from Morden O'Hare, and this is a pretty long question. I'm going to read it anyway. This is pretty long. He says, I don't make any money out of photography currently, but I have a notion to sell a few limited prints at a point in time when I consider I have a selection of landscape photos that's good enough. I don't intend on making a living just to make a bit for satisfaction and to recoup my costs. I have made some half-hearted attempts to have an internet social media presence with Facebook, 500 pics, and a blog I've been writing on regularly for several years and on my website, but I find it hard to be consistent with it due to time constraints. My question is, is this a waste of time or a waste of my limited time? It seems to me that most of the photographic social media interaction, backslapping, and internet traffic come from other photographers, which is fine if I was wanting to sell tours, but there doesn't seem to be any path to print sales. I'm not even sure many people sell prints off their websites. Would I be better off saving my time and ditching all of the social media blogging stuff and just wait patiently until I can get a range of high-quality prints into a local gallery of local scenery? For example, ditch my online ego and go it the old-fashioned way. Martin Bailey, you're the print expert. You run workshops. You got a massive online social footprint. What or how would you advise Morton O'Hare on how to proceed? Should he kill his social media persona and become an offline person, or is there a pathway that can serve both, both masters?
So firstly, hi Morden. I know Morden. We've communicated online a lot, so I already know him. I think he's in many ways he's hitting a nail on the head. The first thing that I thought as I read this question as well is, he talks about how he's not been able to be consistent due to time constraints. If you really did want to build a social following, you have to commit to it. And I mean, remember we laughed a while back about how I advised Valerie not to do a podcast unless she was able to commit to do it every week, at least once a week. It is a big commitment. I started out on Sunday creating this week's podcast, my own podcast. It took me a day longer than I thought, and so it's taken 2.5 days to do one episode this week. That's a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
If that was just a blog post, if I didn't record it, it would have taken me just under that. It's only an hour or so more to record and release. So for me, it is a big commitment, and I try to do it every week when I'm not traveling. So yes, if you want to do that, if you want to make that commitment, then go ahead. It will help in some ways, but Morden is correct in that, other photographers don't buy prints so much. I sell maybe a handful of prints a month, and I've got a reasonable social footprint. Some months I only sell a couple. Some months I'll sell a few more, and I'm not retiring on my print sales for sure. Now there are a couple of reasons for that. The first one is, it might be just that my photography's crap, so I don't want to try and make it that I make out that I could sell more.
Yeah.
But one of the main reasons, and this is also what Morden touches on, is that for me, there's people in Japan don't buy prints. The majority, and in fact, I've only sold 3 prints domestically, and the other couple of hundred or so have all gone overseas. So I think that there's definitely something to do with your location, and he also touches on something that I had a conversation once, not so long ago, with someone very high up, or probably as high as you can get in a particular media company, as in print media company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to mention the name, but I was told a story about someone that I think I might have relayed this on TWiP in the past as well. But there was a guy that was going out making beautiful work in the US, making beautiful work and trying to sell it in fairs around the country, art fairs, and he wasn't selling them very much at all. And that's even when you've got a market. There are people there that want to buy, people are going to these places to buy prints. If you see something beautiful, you'd think they'd buy it. It doesn't always happen. And what the guy did was he started to take photographs while he was traveling around the country in certain areas for these art fairs and trying to sell his work on the weekends. He would spend some time there and photograph. And then he started to take those photographs and print them for the next time he was in that region in the next year. That's probably the same fair.
Yeah.
And then what happened was those photographs started to sell. And he found that his beautiful fine art prints that he's been doing of what he wants to shoot are no longer really a part of his business. He's concentrating on shooting in a specific area and then selling photographs, prints of that area at prints as he visits. And this is what Morden talks on at the end, quality prints into a local gallery of local scenery.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think it needs to be a gallery, although that might work. But I think for sure you need to be, one of the biggest ways to sell prints in fairs is to photograph the area that you're actually working from. It's like people go to Yosemite. They're not going to go away. They walk into a gallery there and see a beautiful print of a scene in Yosemite. They're going to want that as opposed to something else. You know, it's a memento of a visit, and people love to hang out of their local area. They've got more. They can relate to it more. So I think for sure. I mean, the online presence is important, but not when it comes to selling prints necessarily. People will buy prints. A lot of people I know buy my prints because they know me. They want to invest in a bit of me, and they want to help me sometimes. You know, it's like buying an artist's art is a great way to support them. That's certainly a part of it. So it's not to be ruled out. And I think if you do start to set up a store, an online store, then keep plugging at it. It can be fun. But if you don't find it to be fun, if you don't enjoy doing that kind of social networking and things like that, then, you know, don't pull your hair out over it. I literally, the first thing I would do would be to concentrate on finding out where you can sell prints locally, shoot local scenes, and try to work from there. And then if you find that you get a bit of traction, you know, even local coffee shops, it doesn't necessarily need to be a gallery. Coffee shops, places like that, they'll often say, you know, you decorate their walls for them in return for putting a price tag on the bottom of each print and some name cards or a brochure at the cash register. You might even do something where you pay them a percentage for anything that you sell.
Of course, yeah.
But
yeah.
So there's lots of ways of doing it. But I think, yeah, if you want to sell prints online to other photographers is not the best way to do it.
I've always wondered about that, though. I mean, I see prints in coffee shops and different, restaurants in the area that I live in all the time, and I always wonder, do those sell? Like, do people? Because I don't think I've ever purchased a print from a coffee shop. Like, I'm sitting there and like, oh, I may look up and say, oh, that's a really nice shot, and then go back to what I'm doing. I never look up and say, oh, that's a really nice shot. I need to have that on my wall in my house. Let me purchase that. I've never done that. Conversely, if I came to your site and I saw something from my local area, I'd probably buy it. Like, oh wow, So that's the social versus terrestrial thing. I don't know. Lee, what about you? I mean, you're more on the video side and less on the print side, but do you have an opinion on this?
I've got an opinion on everything.
Whether it be right or wrong.
Right? Absolutely.
Lee, when I want you to have an opinion, I'll give it to you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I kid.
My wife is watching, so I won't make a comment that'll get me into trouble later.
Okay.
So, well, first of all, I think the one thing that I thought of when I saw this in the notes is definitely what Martin said. The coffee shops, I think, is a great one. And my next point will probably at least the coffee shop as well. In terms of the online ego stuff, I think there is a certain element to that in the sense of it's all marketing, and marketing, like sales, it's a numbers game. So from a numbers point of view, I think you still want to be out there and you still want to be doing stuff because that's going to build your audience. And if you're going to do a gallery, particularly if you want to be in one of the larger galleries, I've got a lot of friends who are photographers. If you want to be in that larger gallery, you've got to have a name. They're not just going to put anyone into the gallery. The other thing is like Martin said, absolutely keep it up regularly. I'm very good at giving that advice as opposed to doing it myself, but you've got to keep it up regularly. And the other thing is make your marketing more targeted. So if you're finding that it's mainly other photographers who are following you and they're not your target market, well then have a think about what could I be doing differently? Could I be maybe posting on Pinterest instead of Google+? Or should I be posting on Instagram instead of Facebook? And what is it that you're posting? Even with the coffee shops, go and find a more upscale coffee shop in a more upscale neighborhood, because generally the clients who are going to go into that coffee shop are going to have more disposable income, where if they see a print on the wall and they go, oh yeah, $500, yeah, no worries, I'll take it. So yeah, I think keep it up, but be smart about it and make it as targeted as possible.
Be strategic about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So we should as you guys were talking, I was thinking we should probably do a whole show on, Martin, we've done a show on prints, but we should do a show on prints and galleries and, both online and offline and what the options are and best practices. In fact, Martin, that might be a book in there for you. Since you already did an ebook on printing with Craft and Vision, maybe there's another book on taking it to the next level in terms of printing out your gallery installation or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm managing
good idea. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you with your comment about you giving Lee his opinion earlier, you reminded me of our mutual friend David Duchemin when you said that. He'll often say, "You shut up when you're talking to me."
Yeah, exactly. Well, our mutual friend David Duchemin is an ex-comedian, much like our mutual co-host on the show, Mr. Lee Herbert, ex-comedian. See, they
Yeah,
have that
yeah.
wit, that wit. That just you gotta keep
Yeah.
up with
Oh,
them.
he's sharp. It's great. I mean, we did my my Hokkaido landscape tour with David this year, and it's like sitting with a I mean he's still a comedian. He's an amazing guy, but he's still a comedian, and he sat behind me on the bus, and I was just crying with laughter most of the time.
I love it. I love it.
Great.
Yeah, we need to get him back on TWiP again and do a touch base. All right, guys, let's we're running a little bit long. Let's dive into the picks of the week. This segment is where you guys can mention something to the TWiP army as long as it's related to photography somehow. So Lee, I'm going to let you go first. What's your pick of the week?
Cool. So my pick of the week, I'm not sure if this has been picked before because I haven't listened to every episode, but my pick is Trigger Trap. And has that been on before?
I don't think so. I think the first time I heard about it was in your webinar.
Oh, fantastic. So Trigger Trap are a company who make these cool little adapters that you can plug into your smartphone or tablet or smart device and use them as a remote trigger for your cameras. And you get different connectors depending on which camera you got. So you got Nikon, Canon, Panasonic, Sony, all that. And so to begin with, you can use it just as a remote shutter release. So it can release on sound. So you could clap and that'll cause your camera to take the photo. You could do it over Wi-Fi and send it out. But they've also got some really cool time-lapse functions built in, and they actually just released a second. They've got good time-lapse functions in their free app, but they also released a paid-for app that's specifically designed for time-lapse photography, where you can almost build your time-lapse settings as modules. So they actually just released that a couple of days ago, which I'm really excited about. So if anyone's interested in remote triggering their cameras or using these as controls for time-lapse if your camera doesn't have an intervalometer built in, it's a really cool thing to have. One little tip that I'll give you with it is if you're going to be doing time lapses, you do have to leave the app open on your phone for this to keep working, and that's obviously going to suck the battery dry. So what I did is I actually went out, well, I did this because I used to have staff discount. I just bought a spare iPod Touch and I use that as my little intervalometer, or use an iPad because the battery's going to last you a lot longer on that.
Very cool. And what was the price of this thing?
It depends what cable you get it with for your camera, but I think it's in the sort of $50 to $70 region.
Okay, so not bad. And it seems like it would probably last forever if you treat it properly, right?
Yeah, and the really great thing, that there's a couple of different ones out there. The thing that I really like about Trigger Trap is that you buy the dongle, and if you have multiple camera systems, you buy different cables for the different systems, so you don't have to buy a new one for every camera system you've got. You just buy a new cable for every camera system you got. So it's a bit modular.
So you keep the brains. The brains are separate than the connecting mechanism, which is good. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I've been using one of those. Mine's been to Antarctica and all over the place, so I can vouch for the build of the things. They're good. I've had mine a number of years.
It's a secret weapon for photographers, because until you mentioned it, Lee, the first time during the webinar, I had no idea that existed. Now I know how all you pros that do these awesome looking time lapses do it. It's that thing. That's the secret weapon. So.
And you can see I'm an old timer because I got the black one, which was the Kickstarter one. The new ones are red, which are really. I'm tempted just to buy it because I really like the red one.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Red's my favorite color too.
Yeah,
cool.
Me too.
Awesome.
Mine's the black one. I wish I'd got the red one.
All right, well, I'll have bragging rights when mine shows up.
Yeah.
All right, Lee, thanks, man. That's a perfect pick of the week. All right, Mr. Martin Bailey, what is your pick of the week?
Okay, I recently upgraded to the Mark II of the Artist's Viewfinder. I mean, this has become quite an expensive app, but it's basically what it does is it gives you the ability to use your iPhone to just see how much of a scene you would be cropping down to with various focal lengths. And I use this for teaching more than I use it for actual, for what it's for. But it's great to be able to, you're trying to talk to someone about how the focal length affects the scene that you're looking at. But an app for actually going out and planning shoots, it's great. If you take photos with this while you've got the app open, you basically program in the various focal lengths that you want to shoot at. So I do like 24, 35, 50 millimeters, 70, 100, and just a few in, right up to 560 millimeters, which is the longest focal length that my cameras or my lenses give me. And then you also program in your cameras. So I have the 7D Mark II, which is a crop factor camera. I've got the 1DX and the 5D Mark III. And obviously the 5D and the 1D are both full frame, so it doesn't change. But on the tap of a few buttons, you can also show the effect of the crop factor, and it all just sort of really it just gives you a great representation of what you'll see on the the screen of the iPhone. But the other thing is that if you actually take photos there, it'll embed all of that information into the photos and GPS and stuff like that. So it helps for planning trips as well. So yeah, it's I think it's right now it's 19 pounds, $25 basically. So it's not a cheap app for what it is, but I enjoy using it. And if you teach photography, it's a helpful tool as well.
Love it, love it. Yeah, these are those little known tools that pros use, right? That you have in you have a directory of these or a folder on your phone. That there's these little things that add a little bit of functionality, like the what's the other one that I use? The photographer's ephemeris, right?
That's so good.
Right? I mean, it's perfect. I mean, you can see sunsets, sunrises, where it's going to happen, all this stuff on a certain date from a certain vantage point, so that you can do that pre-planning, like we always talk about. So
yeah. I also use this app for video. Like I've got a location scouting gig tomorrow where I'm actually going to a location that I'll be filming a corporate shoot at next week, and just having that on my phone, so I can just check out my shot, and I can actually storyboard with this app. So even for video production, it's really useful.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. The tools that we have available. I mean, remember in the old days we had to use a farmer's almanac, and now we have apps that do all this
stuff. Back in my day, we had to write the almanac.
I'm trying to resist saying in my day. It's still my day, damn it. It'll be my day until I die. How about that? All right, guys. So my pick of the week is I guess it could be as cool as you guys. So I'm in the process of liquidating a lot of my old stuff, like some of my old camera gear, some old tablets that I had, just stuff that's just sitting around my house making me feel bad because it's depreciating. So I'm using this service, and let me screen share this. I'm using this service. You may have heard of it. Where's the window? Here it is. Called Amazon FBA. So FBA stands for Fulfillment by Amazon. So if you haven't heard about this, this is one of the coolest things in the world to me, because this is how it works essentially. So turns out that Amazon has a few products on their site, right? to the tune of millions. So unlike eBay, when you go to eBay and you list something, you got to go take your pictures of your thing and make sure it's good and the lighting, and then write your description and all that stuff. With Fulfillment by Amazon, they have an app, the Amazon Sellers app. You get the thing that you're selling, you scan its barcode, whether it's a book or whatever, or if it doesn't have a barcode, you search for it, you find it, and then you say, list it. Then you push a button that says list it. That's it. And then it gives you this little screen. You could say, you can pick the price that you want to list it at, or you can say, match the lowest selling price of this thing, so so you're not, like shooting in the air. You just say match the existing, the lowest selling price, boom, you're done. But this is where it gets interesting, because in the old days, like with eBay, you do that, and then, okay, somebody bought it. If you manage to navigate your way around the Nigerian scammers and all that stuff, you finally sell it on eBay, then you got to go to the store, up to the UPS store or FedEx, whatever, and ship it and box it and all this stuff. With Amazon, the way this particular service works is what I did. This is just last night. This is a night in the life of Fritter. So I had this pile of stuff sitting on my kitchen counter, scanned it all in, boxed it all up, and basically the flow is you scan everything and you print labels, like little barcode labels to put on the boxes and all this stuff. So I did all that. It took me about an hour to do about 30 items, right? So you box all that stuff up. Amazon prints labels. So and apparently they have some sort of magical deal with UPS because I had a 30-pound box that cost me about $7 to ship. So you print out the label and then you ship it to Amazon. Then it lists it and they sell it and they deposit the money in your account. That's it, just like that. So you take this, you spend a couple of hours gathering up all your old crap. You get it ready. You send it into Amazon. They sell it for you and they give you the money. You know,
Your old crap.
It's just, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, one man's crap, right? So it's just brilliant the way it works because you know the stuff just accumulates over time. You're like, oh, I bought this thing. Oh, I forgot about that thing. And now I'm like going through my house finding things. For example, here's an example. Let me stop the screen share. So I have Drobos. The Drobos run my, all my files and everything are stored on Drobos back there. 2 of them. But they fill up from time to time. So over the years, when they fill up, it'll say, okay, you need to increase your storage, so take out this drive, the 1 terabyte drive, and swap it out for something bigger. So what that leaves you with is a stack of drives that you can't use for anything unless you buy another enclosure or whatever. So I ended up having this stack of drives. So I'm like, yesterday after I made that shipment, I boxed everything up. I'm like, I wonder if those little 1 terabyte Western Digital black drives are worth anything. I mean, they're perfectly fine. They didn't fail or anything. They're just, I just ran out of space on them. So I scanned those things in, and it turns out I can get like $60 each or something for them. And this is after Amazon's fees, when they were just like literally going to be thrown away or something. And I had like 12 of them. So I'm like, that's the camera.
What percentage do they take, Fred?
What's that?
Fred, what percentage do Amazon take?
That's the cool thing about that Sellers app, because you scan, it's an iPhone app, you scan, I'm sure they have Android too, but you scan the barcode, and depending on the product, it's a different percentage or a different amount that they take out for shipping and all that, but it tells you exactly how much you're going to receive.
Wow.
So it tells you what their deduction is for storage and blah blah blah, whatever their fees are. It tells you all that, and then says, for this thing, if it sells, you will receive this much money. Done.
Wow.
And you put it up there. Now I had some experience with Amazon last year. I sold I think it was a laptop or something. Yeah, it was a laptop. I sold a laptop on there, but I didn't use the fulfillment service. I used the, if it sells, tell me and I'll ship it, because I didn't trust them, right? So I'm like, okay. And that worked. I put a laptop up there. This is the first time I used it. I put a MacBook Pro, I think it was an 11-inch Air or something. I put it up there. And I'm like, okay, I'll let it sit for a week or so. I'll see how it goes. If not, whatever. I think less than 24 hours later, it was sold.
Wow.
I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I didn't have to really do anything except scan it. You scan it and then put it in the box and take it to UPS and say ship it. And that was it. So anyway, that's my pick of the week, especially for photographers that have a bunch of stuff that's just lying around that they want to get rid of, or you need extra cash to fund that next Nikon, mirrorless camera that you want to buy. Use a service like this. Go through your house and find a bunch of crap, put it up there. Maybe not crap, but good stuff. Put it up there and let Amazon sell it for you. They even your old books, like these books behind me, you can scan the UPC code and send it in, and they'll sell it as a used book for you, and you're done. So. Anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting, especially in the context of photographers, because we tend to accumulate lots and lots of gear and stuff that we don't need over time. But there was one caveat that I wanted to share, and that's that I'm not exactly sure what the letter of the law is, but they don't allow you to ship clothing or anything like that. So, and I guess camera bags kind of fit into that clothing space, because I was thinking, oh man, this is brilliant. I have a closet full of camera bags that I never use. Maybe I can just liquidate all of these and get rid of them. Nope, denied. Can't put them up there, because in fact you could put them up there, but they have to be in new condition. Like brand new. Like an Amazon new is different than an eBay new. So new on Amazon means new. It is factory sealed with all that stuff. Yeah, unused new.
Well, Frederick, because I like you, to help you out, I can give you my address and you can send me all those bags.
You know what? I might just do that if you pay for shipping, because shipping down under ain't cheap.
The wife will kill me. The wife will kill me.
Exactly. We put on a slow boat. It'll get there sometime in 2018. So cool. So anyway, that's my pick of the week. Amazon FBA. You can get to them at amazon.com/FBA. Fulfillment by Amazon. Coolest service in the world. So very happy with it so far. But I'll keep you guys posted because I sent the boxes that I packed up yesterday. I dropped them off today. And it's interesting because they have this deal with UPS, and I printed the label. As soon as I dropped them off, they were in the system. I looked on my phone and like, boop, there they are. It's in the system tracking, and they go off to the Amazon megalithic fulfillment centers around the country, or around the world actually, and then they sell from there. So interesting stuff.
Cool.
All right, guys, we are at the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. Before we sign off, Martin, what do you have coming up? What's on the Martin Bailey schedule of events?
I've just booked my flights for this year's Namibia tour. Namibia Full Circle with my friend Jeremy Woodhouse. That's going to be in August. And I've got a couple of places left on my Iceland tour towards the end of September as well. So they're the next two big tours. I've got my Pixels to Pigment in studio printing and color management workshop. I've just set up a new one in May. If anyone's in Tokyo, you come and we get up to 4 people in this little office studio here and do the Pixels to Pigment workshop. So that's coming up as well. But yeah, just continuing to podcast. Just put out a very in-depth discussion on how I'm now using a Drobo Mini as my main library, my main store for my Lightroom catalog, and that's enabling me to take it from computer to computer. It all just opens from the Drobo Mini, and so I've just put an episode up about that yesterday as well.
Cool.
And links to everything are at martinbaileyphotography.com.
martinbaileyphotography.com, and in a couple of weeks we may have some TWiP / Martin Bailey news to reveal to the world, right? Some collaborative news. So
absolutely, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy world we live in. Right.
Yeah.
Cool, Martin. Thanks for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, Mr. Lee Herbert, what's going on in your world? What do you have scheduled coming up?
Well, we just finished the time-lapse webinar on TWiP last week, and that's, I believe, up and live. So if anyone wants to learn a little bit about time-lapse, go check that out. We've got a few more of those coming up. We haven't set dates yet, but we've got some pretty exciting stuff coming up on TWiP webinars for talking about more things that photographers can learn using Final Cut Pro and video production. For myself, I've got some courses coming up that I'm running in, I think, towards the end of April, May, and June. I ran these workshops for Canon last year, teaching photographers a 2-day workshop on how to move from stills to motion. So teaching you all about, how to shoot video, light video, audio production, and then day 2 is all hands-on, actually editing the stuff that you shot on day 1. So I'm running 2 of those workshops myself later on this year, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney. And so, yeah, all the details will be, well, they're on my website right now, so just capturingpassion.com. We'll have lots more of those workshops coming up later in the year if you miss these ones.
Excellent. And we'll link to everybody from TWiP. But your website is capturingpassion.com, right?
That's me.
Excellent. Cool. And I guess we're at the end of the show. For me, the only thing that I wanted to mention to the TWiP Army out there is we're just now establishing a Facebook group. So we're going to actually have 2 groups established. The public group is now public. You can get to it at thisweekinphoto.com/Facebook, and that'll redirect you over to our brand new Facebook group. So please go in there and interact with us and ask questions and post images and all that stuff there. We are embracing Facebook. We are now embracing our Facebook overlords. But then also we're establishing a private group as well for the This Week in Photo members. So if you're a member of This Week in Photo, you'll be getting an email soon inviting you into the private Facebook TWiP group where some behind the scenes stuff will happen. So basically there'll be behind the scenes information that's shared out, plus we'll be doing a weekly private hangout for TWiP members only, kind of like a closed door mastermind session for TWiP members. So definitely check that out. Keep an eye out for that. It'll be on the website. We'll have links to everything there in the blog post for this episode and on This Week in Photo in general. So lots of fun things happening in the TWiP universe. But we are at the end of another episode of This Week in Photo. I want to thank our sponsors for their support, our friends at freshbooks.com and lynda.com. And again, be sure to visit us at our website at thisweekinphoto.com. And with that, it's time to take that lens cap off.